The Antifungal Properties of Spices by Rachel Guithacorda and Abigail Cherkis.
The hypothesis. We hypothesize that if different kinds of antifungal substances such as garlic, rosemary, ginger, and turmeric, both fresh and dry, were incorporated into bread and left to grow mold, then the bread with fresh herbs will take longer to grow any mold because they have essential and aromatic oils in them that aren't as prominent in crushed and dried herbs. And the turmeric will grow the least amount of fungal blooms because it contains curcumin, a well-known antifungal that attacks the membrane of fungi. Procedure and methodology. So first we baked, both of us individually baked the bread using the same recipe found online, and we applied the treatment with a ratio of 4 tablespoons of treatment in half of a loaf of bread, and then from there you'd have 2 tablespoons of treatment in 1/4 loaf of bread, and etc. Once the bread was baked, 2 slices were cut 1 centimeter thick and then cut with 7 by 7 centimeters wide. That's our test subject. To strive for consistency, in other words, our constants, the same bread recipe was used in each slice of bread, and each slice of bread was fully zipped in plastic bag. Once the experiment was set accordingly, the bread was checked for fungal blooms every day at the same time each day for 7 days. And that was frequency. The standard of comparison was the bread with no treatment and the bread with antifungal cream. The other pieces of bread were given either garlic, rosemary, ginger, or turmeric, and these are the experimental groups. The data collected were the number of fungal blooms, the dependent variable, and the variable that was controlled was, in other words, the independent variable was the type of treatment baked into the bread. And because the number of trials and the 4 slices, the replicates, in other words, can then lead to statistical differences such as standard deviation, standard error that we can use to evaluate later from our data.
All right, here's figure 1. It shows our bread setup. You can see some fungus growing on our bread. Again, we put them into little baggies, let them out to grow mold.
Okay, here's the table for the number of fungal blooms seen per day. This table shows averages, standard deviation, standard error that were calculated using Excel based off of the 4 trials per type of bread.
Oh yes, and calculations were done in Excel, yes. So for the annotation, we can see that the spice that resulted in the least number of fungal blooms by the end of a week was dry rosemary, which only had 9.5 fungal blooms. And then compared to fresh garlic, which had 2.5 more fungal blooms, dry garlic, which had 7.5 more, dry turmeric, which had 26.5 more, and fresh turmeric, which had 43.5 more, and dry ginger, which had 56 more, and fresh ginger, which had 56.5 more. So here, the standard error can be seen in the graph, with some error bars overlapping during the 7-day mark.
Yeah, and yeah, so this graph shows the growth rate of mold on different spices.
Yeah. And then here is our graph annotation, which essentially says the same thing from the table 1, except in terms of error bars.
In conclusion, at this point in the experiment, only the experimental groups can be compared, meaning only the different types of spices can be compared, so we can't draw a conclusion